Some folks who aren't feeling Trump's optimism right now are American farmers, and they are stuck in the middle of all of this.
Frank, who did you vote for president?
Mr. Trump.
Right?
Trump.
Mr. Trump.
If the election were today, Frank, would you vote for Donald Trump?
No way. Couldn't happen.
No.
You voted for President Trump. So now, in this moment, you say you're in a free fall. What is your message to him?
So I'm off the Trump train. Where I'm going for now is I got to protect my business.
Island, a wheat farmer who says he's lost $400,000 since Trump took office.
I think there was a lot of people who voted for him that want to stay loyal to him, but it's going to get to the point where financially, if it's between supporting the president or losing your family farm.
You voted for the president?
Yes, I did.
And do you support these policies which might be hurting farmers like you?
Right now, we're the ones that are taking the hit.
I think he's sort of backstabbing the main people who got him into office in the Midwest, and he just left us down.
The farmers in America, they lost all their workers because they got deported. And then they voted for Trump. And then they lost a lot of the grants because this guy Musk has been, cleaning out, and he's taking from the poor. The farmers can't pay their bills. They're having to sell. And J.D. Vance set up a company so that he could buy farms. They're buying all the farms in America, just like they did with all the private houses. Oh, you guys are so smart. You're brilliant. You can't make this. Okay, I have positive news. Here's the positive news. Decades of proud ignorance that you've had is coming to an end. Jesus.
I cannot believe that my family farm and my home state of Nebraska are going to be flat broke within.
Let's talk about Nebraska farmers who are losing everything, their businesses, their land, and their future after voting for Trump. These farmers supported Trump's migration policies, his economic plans, and his tax cuts for the wealthy, thinking it would benefit them. Now they are fleeing far, losing workers, losing money, and realizing that they were just pawns in a bigger game. We are about to break down how Nebraska got itself into this mess, why migrant labor is crucial for the agriculture, and how these farmers ignored every warning until it was too late. Let's get into it.
Nebraska, you guys better go down to your local unemployment offices and start getting names and numbers, because from what I hear, you don't have no workers, and you guys are worried about going bankrupt. Somebody on here saying you had a 300-year-old farm or a ranch that was going to face bankrupt. They're going to lose the family ranch. 300 years, 1725. You know that was before y'all stole it from the natives. So let's not go there. But anyways, yeah, you call up the local unemployment office, and there's people that are getting money to sit at home, and they're looking for work, and you just let them know that you have work that could be done out there, that you've had illegal people working on your lands and your farms and your ranches all this time. And unfortunately, they're not wanting to come to work because they're worried ICE is going to come get them. So you don't have no workers, which you're saying this is causing you guys to go bankrupt. So yeah, there's that. I just thought I'd give you a little advice. There's this unemployment office. Usually every state has them. Just go and let them know what you need. And I'm sure that all the Nebraska people that are on unemployment, they'd love to have them jobs. So why don't we start there first, okay, my friends? And in the meantime, maybe reach out to the White House, the budgeting office, and they owe us money here in Illinois they're not paying. So maybe they'll give you some of that, since there's a lot of money floating around, right?
As someone who was born and raised in Nebraska and who works in public policy, nonprofit sector in Nebraska, I can provide a little bit of context as to what's going on with the state, with the budget, why everybody's freaking out. So in our state constitution, there's a provision that says you cannot go into a deficit. You have to have a balanced budget. That has never really been a problem. We've always had a budget surplus. Even 3 to 4 years ago, we had a budget surplus of like $1 billion. And now, under Pillen, we have completely blown through all that extra money, and there's a $432 million deficit of the budget. The other issue that's happening in Nebraska right now, well, there's two really, is we've essentially run the migrant workforce out of the state. It's a red state. We've had ICE raids in Nebraska before at meatpacking plants, farms, etc. It's nothing really new to the state. But the other factor that's going into that with the lost revenue is that property taxes are outrageous. Nebraska is one of the highest tax states in the country. I just recently left and went to a blue state. I thought for sure taxes were going to be worse. I'm actually taking home more money now than I was in Nebraska. So that's another thing. People have promised tax relief. We've robbed Peter to pay Paul, and now it's time to pay the bill, and there's no money left. So this legislature session might be really long. There's going to be a lot of cuts. I'm not sure what will happen. But if you want to stay up to date on what's happening in Nebraska, I highly suggest the Nebraska Examiner or the Flatwater Free Press.
I cannot believe that my family farm and my home state of Nebraska are going to be flat broke within 6 months. I cannot believe this is happening. I cannot believe that the undocumented workers who basically drive our entire agricultural economy just got up and left. They just left. Why? Because we voted for Trump? Because we voted to have them torn from their homes in the middle of the night by ICE, because we wanted to see their families ripped apart because we don't like brown people, so they just abandoned us in our hour of need before we were able to like replace them with, I don't know, like white teenagers or something like that, you know, like before we were able to identify and employ an entire demographic of people who's willing to make less than minimum wage for terrible working conditions. I can't believe this is happening. If only somebody had told us that this was a possibility. If only somebody like Kamala Harris or Tim Walz or Bernie Sanders or any of the liberal politicians, Jasmine Crockett, Gavin Newsom from California, or, you know, almost every major media outlet, or every economist in the nation, or all of the liberals. If only somebody had told us that undocumented workers are absolutely vital to the existence of our agricultural industry. If only somebody had said that 1,000 times, day after fucking day. If only somebody had said, hey, they're not replaceable because white American teenagers do not want to work for slave labor wages in the fields in the hot sun. They are not going to be replaceable.
Nebraska. I mean, if you could, there's a little bit of good news coming out of Nebraska. I mean, if you could call it good news. They have identified a way to cut their budget shortfall pretty much in half. Now, if you haven't been paying attention to the story that's happening in Nebraska, there's a lot of panic that the state is going to go bankrupt. And there's some saying it will happen in just the matter of a couple of months because they have a $400 million budget shortfall. There's a lot of different reasons for it. Let me tell you what they are. But a lot of it very much is self-inflicted wounds. And now they're kind of dancing around going, oh my God, what did we do? Nebraska is experiencing right now at a state level what we're all about to face at a federal level. So I think it's important to pay attention there because this is what happens when you give giveaways and subsidies and tax breaks to the wealthy and you do all of these things that in the moment feel right because they get you votes and they get you popularity and they get you all this shit. And then when you have to pay the bills, you realized you've fucked yourself. And that's exactly what Nebraska has done. I think the number one reason that Nebraskans should be concerned is that they've lost their immigrant labor. Nebraska was one of those states that had there's a lot of farming, a lot of agriculture type businesses, and they use a lot of immigrant labor. Whether they're documented or not does not matter. There were people who were not native Nebraskans who had moved there and were working there. Nebraskans, like a bunch of other states, voted for Trump, which told their immigrant population, we're not welcome here. Instead of waiting for the jackboot stormtroopers from ICE to come knock on their doors, the immigrants like pieced out. We're going to go someplace where people will use our labor and will like us and will treat us with a little bit of dignity. So they probably hustled their asses to Colorado or California or someplace else where they could get work and they could be safer. So rumor has it that this was like 60% of their labor force. And when you lose that much of your labor force, you've got no one to pick your wheat, you got no one to slaughter your cows, you're in big fucking trouble. So that's the start of it. They're not making as much revenue. They're not supplying as much food into the food chain, which, by the way, screws all of us. Our food supply is going to be fucked if this happens. So let's just say that. But they also did a lot of other things, right? They put in corporate tax breaks and they did all this other stuff. Now suddenly they don't have a pot to piss in. Their budget committee has gone back to work and they're trying to find places where they can find this money. And they've identified 165 million more in revenue that they can bring in. 65 million of it is from, well, let's just go ahead and raise the taxes on the corporations. Amazing how quickly the money pours in if you make everybody pay their fair share. But I digress. Anyway, they've also done some other things, cut some extra funding. They cut a major portion of funding to the University of Nebraska Medical Center, which is quite frightening for the people who work there and a lot of the research they're doing. Probably have to make a total separate video about that because university hospitals all across the nation are getting crushed right now because they're losing a lot of their funding. But one thing they've also decided to do was to take the cash out of their slush fund. Every state kind of has this emergency fund. And I get that they think, okay, this is an emergency. We got to use the slush fund. So they're putting their slush fund toward their budget deficit. I understand that. But what's happening is, in case you don't know, Nebraska is one of those, let's use the word socialist states, meaning they are one of those red states that gets more from the federal government than they put in. Okay, they get a ton of subsidies for their farmers. They get a ton of stuff. And sadly, there's a lot of people in Nebraska who are poor or even poverty level citizens. And they need government funding. They need things like Medicaid and SNAP benefits and those types of things. Well, when you've got the Doge dickheads going, nope, cut it all off. We don't give a fuck who starves. We don't care about poor people. We don't care about children. Cut it all off. What's happening is the federal government will start giving less to Nebraska. And Nebraska is going to be expected to pull herself up by her bootstraps. Not if they've raided their slush fund. If they don't have any money left in their slush fund, they can't help their hungry and poor citizens. So again, it's all self-inflicted wounds because this is how they voted and they supported an administration that was going to slash. They supported an administration that said no more brown people. They did this to themselves, and it's very hard to feel sorry for them, right? There's a lot of people on here that are like, bye-bye. But it's a major hit to our food supply. I took some notes. Let me just tell you. They are the third largest producer of corn. They're a big producer of soybeans. They are top 15 producer of wheat. And I don't know if you knew this, but Nebraska, number one in popcorn. They're the number one producer of popcorn. We stand to risk to lose our popcorn, people. But that's not even what I want to talk about. They are one of the top producers of beef. If you've not, there are some exceptional cattle ranchers in Nebraska, and they provide a huge portion of America's high quality beef, but also pork, poultry, and wait for it, eggs. You think they're expensive now? You shut down the state of Nebraska, that's a big hit to the egg industry. Now, the what would be the cherry on the top of the fuck around and find out Sunday is that 43 days before the last election, Nebraska's state house made a Hail Mary to try to change their electoral college process. If you're not familiar, Nebraska has 5 electoral votes, but it's not a winner take all. 3 of the electoral college votes go to, however, those 3 congressional districts. So if 2 of those districts go blue, that's two electoral college to the Democrats and 1 to the Republicans. And then the other 2 are given to the person who the party that wins the overall state. So if the Republicans win the total state, they would get that. So last year, the way it stood to be was that Donald Trump would probably get 4 electoral votes. Kamala Harris would get 1. 4 out of 5 isn't quite enough when you're a Trump-loving, conservative, middle America white man who happens to be in the Nebraska State House. They didn't even want the black lady to get even 1 vote. Oh, no. They tried to change 43 days before the election. They tried to change their electoral college process to a winner take all. And luckily it didn't pass. There was somebody in the state house that said, this is dumb, we're not doing it. So it was dead in the water. But my point being is that this state is led and probably is populated by people who were die-hard, rabid Trump supporters. People who will throw a Hail Mary at the last fucking minute because they wanted him to have an even bigger win. And now they're crying.
Let's start with a bigger picture. Nebraska is broke. The state is facing a $432 million US budget deficit, which is shocking because just a few years ago, they had $1 billion surplus. What happened? They voted for policies that destroyed their own economy. Farmers pushed for stricter immigration laws, believing they were protecting American jobs. Instead, they ran off the very people who kept their farms running, undocumented immigrant workers. Now, those farms are struggling to survive because white American workers refused to do the labor that immigrants used to do. At the same time, Nebraska slashed taxes for wealthy and corporations, thinking it would help businesses to grow. Instead, it drained state revenue, while everyday people, especially farmers, were left with skyrocketing property taxes and fewer government resources. For years, we had the MAGA crowd screaming about deporting undocumented immigrants. But guess what? Those immigrants were essential to Nebraska's economy. 60% of Nebraska's farm labor force disappeared because of Trump's migration crackdown. Meat packing plants, wheat farms, and cornfields, all of them depended on migrant workers. Now, no one is left to do the work. White Americans are not about to take these jobs. Let's be real. These farmers expected cheap labor, not their own kids working for low wages in the field. Now Nebraska is begging for workers, but it's too late. Migrants moved to states that actually wanted them, places like California and Colorado, where they can be treated with dignity and paid better. Why would they come back to Nebraska? Another reason these farmers are struggling, Trump's economic policies made everything worse for them. Tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico hurt exports, especially soybeans and beef, which Nebraskans heavily rely on. Government farm subsidies have dried up, leaving small farmers with no financial safety net. GDVs and big corporations are now buying up bankruptcy farms, just like they did with housing. These MAGA voters are literally losing their land to the same elite instead of blaming Biden or migrants. Nebraska's farmers should take a hard look at the man they put in office. They fell for the Trump con, and now they are watching their generational farms disappear. Nebraska's downfall is not just a local issue, it's a preview of what will happen to the entire country if MAGA policies continue. When you cut taxes for the rich, you lose funding for essential services. When you attack migrants, you lose the workforce that keeps industries running. When you blindly follow politicians who don't care about you, you will get to be left behind. And here is the real kicker. Even after all of this, some of these farmers still support Trump. They are so deep in denial that they would rather lose their farms than admit they were wrong. The truth is, politics affect everything. Your job, your beers, your future. These Nebraska's farmers are learning that lesson the hard way. At the end of the day, this is a self-inflicted wound. Nebraska's farmers ignored the warnings, voted for policies that hurt them, and now they are paying the price. Will they finally wake up? Or will they keep making the same mistakes and digging themselves deeper? Let me know what you all think in the comment section.